What sort of battery degradation do you think nearly 200,000 miles has done to this Tesla Model S 75D that cost me 11.5 grand? That's something that people have been inundating me with messages and direct comments saying, what's the percentage? What's the degradation? I answered this in the previous video, but just in this is the range I'm getting. And when I took it to Tesla for just over £3,000 worth of repairs, that's the previous video, they just said, it's in good health. We don't give you a percentage, we just say it's good, which is useless. So I thought in the ever-ending, never-ending, should I say, search of content, I will answer this question on what is probably the final video of this content car. What's the state of health of this battery? What's the battery degradation? It's easy for me to say. And ultimately, is it as bad as the Daily Mail comment section tells me it should be? According to them, I would get at best 100,000 miles out of an EV's battery before it needs replacing. So this should be on its arse. This should be dead. It's nearly double of replacement age. So it's a wonder it's still working. So let's see through a couple of different tests on what range this has, and by that, what percentage we've lost over the last 190,000 miles. Now in a Model 3 or a Y, you can actually go into the car's service menu and tell it to do a battery health test. With this 2018 Model S, that's not an option, so I can't do that. So I've had to rely on the one thing I've already done in the last video, real world range, and there's also an app I'm going to use which gives you a battery percentage. By combining those two, we should end up with the figure we're after. So the first thing I'm going to go off is what I did in the last video, the real world range. Now this is something that's probably the best thing to do with any EV. Take it to 100%, drive it until it's nearly flat, and then you can figure out its realistic range, and then look at that compared to what the real world range was when it was new, and it gives you an idea. So as I said in the previous video, this is getting about 190 miles. I've done a ton of journeys to the office and back, which is handily enough, about 200-mile round trip, and that's, well, about 45 less than it was when it was new. So research and my own experience from years ago tells me that this 75D would do about 235 miles in the real world, especially at this time of year, and I'm getting 190 miles. So that is roughly, let's call it between 80 and 85% remaining health. So that's step one, that's data point number one. The next one is the app. Now for this, I've gone for something called Tessie. Excuse me, it's freezing. It's a common app, it's a Tesla app, and it allows you to do a lot of stuff, but the thing I'm interested in was the battery percentage health that it gives you. Now it does this by contacting the car via Tesla's API, presumably talking to the BMS of the car, the battery management system, and once you've driven it and charged it and driven it and charged it enough, it gives you a percentage state of health. So essentially, that's what I've got now. I've got the app, I've done all the driving and the charging, and according to that, I have now just over 85% remaining battery health from this 190,000 mile EV. Now, again, from research, I've seen quite a lot of people say it's slightly optimistic based on Model 3 Ys. So let's knock a couple of percentage points off that, just to be safe, and call it 83% battery health, which is pretty much bang on what the real world range is telling me. Between 80 and 85% is what I thought, and the app is saying, let's say 83%. So that's the figure I'm going to go off, 83% battery health, and it's done 190,000 miles. Just to put that into some sort of context, that's just under 0.9% loss of range for every 10,000 miles this has driven. Now, there's a ton of data out there for Teslas in terms of battery health, and the general curve seems to be, they drop to about 90%-ish, and then just stabilise and sit there for a long time with a very gradual degradation. In fact, the only thing I can tell you about this ex-company car is that in its first year it did roughly 50,000 miles. 50,000 miles in the first year. And judging by the tyres that came off this, which were far from legal, well, I don't know how well it's been looked after, but this just shows what a company car, which usually isn't as well looked after as a private one, can do. Zero maintenance, original battery, original motor. Now, this is where a slight comparison is probably worth doing with a combustion engine vehicle. And before anybody says anything, I am not anti-combustion engine. Behind that wall there in that garage is a 20-year-old V6. I love cars, whether it's petrol or electric. Find me a combustion engine vehicle that has never had a maintenance, let alone an oil change, done nearly 200,000 miles, and still drives exactly the same as it used to do. It just doesn't drive as far. Combustion engine vehicles typically lose a little bit of performance, a little bit of efficiency over time, unless they're really well looked after. That's normal. Just think of the Top Gear videos where they find out how many horses have escaped. But these, again, this has got exactly the same performance. It drives exactly as it did, and ultimately that I see as a benefit. The amount of times people say to me, well, I've got a 200,000 mile petrol car, many of them, more than that, it's still the same engine. It kind of isn't, is it? It's kind of like Trigger's broom. You know, you've replaced, what, 8 handles and 13 broom heads. It's not the same broom, it's not the same engine, because you've replaced quite a lot of components, many times over on some of them, so it's not the same car, it's not the same engine. Now don't get me wrong, the bulk of it will be, but has it had a new, I don't know, clutch, gearbox, sensors galore, oils, filters, spark plugs, many things that we all change with time. The car I've got in there, I spent £1,700 on that last year for a new cam chain because it was stretching. They had to drop the engine to get to it. This will never have something like that. But I guess if I flip it round and look at the negative side of this, it's quite different and in some ways slightly unfair, which is I think what people are scared of. With a combustion engine car, you have, let's say, 10 years worth of maintenance and repairs, many thousands of pounds, and that's spread out not entirely, evenly, but it's spread out over the however many owners that car's had. You've got repairs in you've got maintenance in year 1, 2, 3, you've got repairs throughout its life. So the maintenance cost for everything it's done, again, has been spread out between different owners, whereas with an EV, there's zero maintenance on the drivetrain. And then, if the battery end up does go in, whoever owns it at that point has the big bill. I guess that's the downside, isn't it? But again, that's something which I see people unfairly kind of comparing. You're not doing apples for apples. So with an EV, let's say the one that's happened recently to me, a Nissan Leaf. Someone said, oh, Nissan are going to charge me 15 grand or something like that for a new battery. This is obscene. This is why EVs don't work. Who would go to a main dealer for a new battery and pay main dealer install prices for them to install it? Let's flip that round. Imagine you've got a Golf GTI that's 10, 15, 20 years old, whatever, and the engine blows up. You need a new engine. Who's going to go to Volkswagen and buy a brand new engine and pay Volkswagen to fit it? It'd be extortionately expensive. You would go to an independent garage. You would probably get a used engine, a refurb of some sort. And it's the same with batteries. You wouldn't go to Nissan for a new Leaf battery. You would go to a specialist. You would get maybe a refurb battery or a used one. The trouble is, the market's not mature enough to be a lot of used batteries out there from damaged cars or written off cars. There's not enough people doing it yet because there's not a market to repair EVs. They haven't been around long enough, and clearly they're lasting longer than anybody thought. We will get there eventually, I am sure of that. We will get to a point where every garage can do the basic repairs on a battery, and maybe even more than that. But you will have independent specialists everywhere, much like you do with any combustion engine type of repair. ECUs, remember when they came in? I remember this very clearly because I was reading my magazines all the time 20, 30 years ago. ECUs are going to put garages out of business. No local garage will be able to repair an ECU because you need all this specialist equipment. You can get it done at so many places now, it's just become normal, and that's what will eventually happen with batteries. It's just going to take time. So whether you like or hate EVs, the data is quite clear. With stuff like Teslas, who really know how to look after their batteries, they're lasting way longer. With an old Nissan Leaf, it would be nowhere near this. So you get what you pay for to a point, but any modern EV, certainly that you buy new today, should have this level of longevity. as an average. You of course are going to have, like you do with petrol engines, some that die sooner, some that die later. I should also point out that this Model S is a 2018 car. It comes with an 8-year unlimited mileage warranty on the battery and drivetrain. Is there a combustion engine car ever out there that's had an unlimited mileage 8-year warranty? I could put 1 million miles on this, and if that battery drops below 70%, Tesla will fix it or refurb it. They'll do something. So there are benefits, but there are also negatives. I freely admit, if I could not charge at home, I would not own an EV right now. The network is simply not good enough in my area. Well, practically non-existent. I'm not pretending that anyone can own an EV. It's simply not the case. But when it comes to used EVs, which is the entry level to the market, the batteries are probably the thing I wouldn't be worrying about at all. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you're buying a 180,000 mile car that's 10-year-old, a Nissan Leaf, something like that, it's a factor, but the car's probably costing a couple of grand at that stage anyway. And again, we will get to the stage of replacements, refurbs, repairs. There isn't just a single battery in this car, or any EV for that matter. It's not like an iPhone where you take the battery out. There are many, many, many battery cells in this. So if some of them have faults, you replace those faulty cells and then you have a refurbished pack. There are ways to fix them. There's just not enough people doing it. If you haven't seen the previous videos where I introduced you to the car, then in the second video I spent 5 days cleaning it inside and out and machine polishing it, and then in the last video thousands of pounds at Tesla repairing what was wrong, then please do watch those. If not, then, well, thanks for watching this. If you still are at this stage, I went on a little bit of a rant there. I am more than delighted with an £11,500 Model S, still in full warranty with the battery and drivetrain, and until September 2026. I just can't keep it. 2 Teslas is silly, and this is too big. She didn't drive it. So thank you ever so much for watching. Hopefully that has given you a bit of confidence when it comes to buying a used EV. But like you would do with a combustion engine car, look at many examples, do your research, see what is normal. And in terms of battery health, well, I think that's for a future video, because that's a question I get an awful lot as well, and every car is different. Don't forget, members get videos usually on Sunday instead of Friday, and occasional members only videos as well. Hopefully you've had a good year so far. No idea when this video is going out, so it could be February by the time it does, but either way, hope you had a good start to the year, and it's going to be even better from now on. Right, my hands are literally numb, because even though it looks quite pleasant, believe me, it's below freezing. I want to get back inside. So thanks for watching, guys. See you soon.